You might think a fast, analytical mind would make life much easier. But often, that very intelligence becomes a trap that prevents any real action. We call this overthinking, but it's really a survival strategy that lost its way. Psychology shows our brains are hardwired to scan for threats just to keep us safe. In the modern world, those threats are rarely physical predators anymore. Instead, our minds treat a simple email like a life-or-death situation. Imagine spending 2 hours drafting a short, 3-sentence reply to your boss. You weigh every word while imagining every possible way they might react poorly. Cognitive psychology calls this maladaptive rumination. This is when you chew on thoughts without ever reaching a useful solution. You aren't actually solving anything, you're just rehashing the same uncertainty. You feel like you're being careful, but you're actually stuck on a mental treadmill. This constant analysis burns through your energy before the day even truly begins. It leaves you feeling exhausted, yet you haven't made a single firm decision. Eventually, the fear of making the wrong move leads to making no move at all. This cycle creates a false sense of safety while keeping your anxiety levels high. To break free, we have to understand why the brain gets stuck in these loops. You spend 3 hours mentally pacing, yet you haven't moved an inch toward a real solution. This happens because your brain often confuses the act of thinking with the act of solving. Modern psychology shows a massive difference between productive problem-solving and what we call rumination. Healthy problem-solving usually moves in a straight, logical line from a challenge to a concrete next step. In contrast, the overthinking brain tends to run in a tight, repetitive circle that never ends. Rumination is a repetitive loop where your mind focuses entirely on the causes and consequences of your distress. Imagine you sent a simple email to your boss, and now you're dissecting every single word. You play the scene back over and over, looking for a hidden mistake that probably isn't there. Instead of moving on to your next task, you just keep reheating the same anxious thought. Research suggests this occurs because the brain's internal stop signal for certain thoughts fails to engage properly. Your mind is searching for a feeling of absolute certainty before it finally allows itself to rest. Think about how many times you've replayed a conversation today without actually reaching a new conclusion. This constant looping creates a massive cognitive load that drains your battery before the day even starts. By the time you need to make a real choice, your mind is far too exhausted to function. You end up feeling paralyzed by the very thoughts that were supposed to protect you from mistakes. The harder you try to think your way out, the deeper this mental loop pulls you back in. It feels like you're conducting a high-stakes investigation, but you're actually just running on a treadmill. This endless spinning is why even a small, simple choice can eventually feel like a life-or-death crisis. You've likely stood in a grocery aisle staring at 2 nearly identical brands of pasta sauce. To a stranger, it looks like a simple $3 choice, but your brain treats it like a life-altering crisis. Psychology calls this analysis paralysis, where the sheer volume of options actually freezes your ability to act. You might spend 20 minutes reading reviews for a cheap toaster that you only use for breakfast. Or perhaps you spend a full hour scrolling through Netflix, analyzing every plot summary without actually watching anything. This happens because you are likely what researchers call a maximizer. Maximizers feel a deep internal pressure to find the absolute best option every single time they choose. Unlike satisficers who pick the first thing that works, you feel that settling for good enough is a failure. This mindset means every tiny choice carries the heavy burden of potential regret later on. Your mind runs thousands of silent simulations to ensure you don't make even a minor suboptimal mistake. This process creates a massive cognitive load, which is the total amount of mental energy your brain is using. By the time you finally make a decision, you are already exhausted from the internal mental gymnastics. This leads to decision fatigue, which drains your willpower and leaves you feeling foggy for the rest of the day. You end up feeling drained not by the work you did, but by the thoughts that came before it. Eventually, the fear of making the wrong choice actually prevents you from ever enjoying the right one. This exhaustion doesn't just happen when you are alone, making personal decisions in your own space. It follows you into your conversations, where every word spoken feels like a complex puzzle you have to solve. Socializing should be a source of energy, but for you, it often feels like exhausting labor. You might spend hours after a simple dinner party dissecting every single sentence and facial expression. This mental detective work is the heavy, hidden price of an overthinking mind. Psychology calls this mind reading, where you assume you know exactly what someone else is thinking. You stop listening to what people say and start hunting for the subtext underneath. Imagine a coworker gives you a brief, polite nod in the hallway without stopping to talk. Most people see a busy colleague, but your brain sees a sign of silent resentment. You wonder if you did something wrong or if they are secretly judging your recent work. This happens because your brain treats social uncertainty like it is a physical threat. You are trying to use cold logic to solve an emotional fear that thinking cannot fix. This creates a state of hypervigilance that makes genuine connection feel like a battlefield. You become so busy decoding the other person that you forget to actually be present with them. This leads to social burnout, making you want to isolate yourself just to find some quiet. You might even avoid friends because the mental cleanup after a hangout is too draining. People stop being companions and start becoming complex puzzles that you have to solve. A casual coffee date turns into a high-stakes performance that you have to review later. This loop builds a wall between you and the people who actually care about you. But you aren't doing this to be difficult. You are doing it because you want to feel safe. You believe that if you can predict their judgment, you can somehow prevent the pain of rejection. While we usually see overthinking as a flaw, it often functions as a psychological shield. We use intense analysis as a protective adaptation to manage the deep discomfort of uncertainty. You begin to believe that if you can just think long enough, you can prevent future pain. This is driven by a need for cognitive closure, which is the brain's craving for a definite, certain answer. Imagine you have a difficult meeting on your calendar for sometime next week. Instead of just preparing your notes, you spend hours rehearsing every possible criticism you might face. You play out 20 different scenarios in your head, trying to find a perfect response for each one. Your brain actually rewards this behavior because it feels like you are being productive and staying safe. It creates an illusion of control, making you feel like you've successfully minimized the risk of being surprised. But in reality, you aren't solving a problem. You are just ruminating on events that haven't even happened. You might tell yourself you are being responsible, but you are actually just keeping your mind on high alert. The trap is that you never feel truly safe, because there is always one more scenario to consider. This constant mental rehearsal keeps your stress levels spiked long before the actual event even begins. By the time the meeting finally arrives, you are already exhausted from a fight that never actually occurred. Take a look at how much energy you spend trying to outrun a future that you simply cannot control. Eventually, this habit turns your own mind into a source of constant, self-generated threat. While this feels like a purely mental habit, it is actually triggering a deeper physical reaction in your body. Your brain begins to treat these hypothetical worries as if they were immediate, physical dangers right in front of you. You might assume your overthinking is just a personality trait or a mental habit. But underneath those racing thoughts, your body is executing an ancient physical reflex. Deep within the center of your brain, a structure called the amygdala is constantly scanning. This is your evolutionary alarm system, originally built to protect you from wild predators. Psychology shows that this system cannot distinguish between a physical threat and a scary thought. To your amygdala, a critical email from your boss feels exactly like a mountain lion. When you worry about a future conversation, your brain signals that you are in immediate danger. You aren't just logically considering options. Your pulse quickens and your muscles tighten. Cognitive science refers to this reaction as the biological false alarm response. Your nervous system floods with cortisol and adrenaline to prepare for a physical struggle. Since you cannot physically fight a thought, that intense energy has nowhere to go. This is why overthinking feels so physically draining after a long day. You are essentially running a mental marathon while sitting perfectly still at your desk. This state of chronic high alert eventually disrupts your sleep and your ability to focus. Research suggests that this physical tension then loops back into your brain to trigger more worry. You likely feel this as a knot in your stomach or a heavy, restless pressure. Your brain is desperately trying to protect you, but it is using the wrong survival tools. When you treat every minor uncertainty as a crisis, you remain trapped in survival mode. This physiological hijack makes even the smallest decisions feel like a matter of life or death. However, recognizing this biological glitch is the first step toward reclaiming your internal calm. By now, you likely realize that thinking your way out of overthinking only pulls you deeper. It is like trying to put out a fire by throwing more fuel on it. Real change happens when you stop obsessing over what you are thinking. Instead, you focus on the actual process of your mind at work. Psychology calls this metacognition, which means observing your own mental habits. When you catch a loop starting, you can choose to step back from the edge. You don't have to follow every anxious thought to its most exhausting conclusion. A powerful tool for this is setting a good enough threshold for your decisions. This means choosing the path that works now instead of hunting for perfection. Research suggests perfectionism is often a mask for a deep fear of failure. When you accept good enough, you drain the power from your anxiety. You will notice a sudden and significant drop in your daily mental fatigue. You stop wasting energy on simulations of things that may never happen. This frees you to connect with the world and the people right in front of you. You begin to see that life is happening now, not in a predicted future. Every small, quick decision proves to your nervous system that you are safe. You are retraining your brain to trust your ability to handle whatever comes next. Your thoughts are just mental suggestions, not commands you are required to obey. Ultimately, the goal is to make your mind a tool rather than a cage.